So what I need to do now is bring up our panel of experts. So let's start with Cassandra Horan, who is the General Manager at Busy at Work. Where are you, Cassandra? Make her welcome. Big cheer. As she walks on down. Joining her is Greg Wallace, CEO of Master Plumbers, Gasfitters and Drainlayers of New Zealand. We were partying last night with the Dolphins, weren't we, Greg? Yes, we were. Josh Waddington, Coordinator of Mates Apprentice Resilience Program for Mates in Construction. Come on, Josh. And finally, Kirsty Dickinson, Program Manager of Department Employment, Small Business and Training. Now, I know, Kirsty, you've just arrived today. Have any of the others, I know you were here yesterday, Greg. Were you guys here yesterday? Okay, just I'm not sure if anyone explained this, and I probably should have done it at the start, but when we're running, we've got 55 minutes for this panel session. When we've got 5 minutes left, you'll hear a dripping sound. Have you been hearing that? And have you been wondering what in the hell's going on? It's not a massive leak that we're having here. That's actually just the wind-up. Now, what we haven't done is gone to the end, and if we go over time, this is what actually happens. Can we just have a sound, please? You get flushed. Okay, so if you hear it, don't panic. It just means that we've run out of time. I just thought I'd better give you the heads up on that. All right, this is going to be a very interesting discussion, I know. So I'm going to get down on the floor here. Please, anyone who has questions, fire them away as well. When we were chatting, we did all have a little Zoom meeting prior so that we could just discuss about how it was going to flow. And I can tell you now, I've had Zoom meetings with both of the other previous panels on how it's going to flow, and it has not flown anywhere near like what we spoke about previous. So I'm just giving you the heads up, this could go anywhere. But the national average is 58% of apprenticeships drop out. They drop out. So I guess that's a staggering figure. And I'd love to know your thoughts on why this is happening. Now, I'm happy for you to pass it along if anyone wants to kickstart it though. And you do have to answer.
I can give it a go.
Okay.
So just to flip that stat, it's 58% of apprentices are completing, which is not much better, but a little bit better. There's been some research done into the top 3 reasons apprentices are cancelling. That was done a little while ago. One is they're leaving for higher paid work, and I guess recent cost of living increases are probably not helping with that. Secondly, they've been dismissed or made redundant, and thirdly, they're leaving because they have poor relationships with their supervisors or leading hands or managers. So that's what research sort of says. I would probably, in my experience, say that I think we have an issue a little bit earlier on than that. I think we probably have the wrong people in those apprenticeships. So I think we need to do a little bit of work earlier on. Apprentices are often signing up for apprenticeships because dad did it, uncle owns a business, I'm not academic, so I should just do a trade. School have told me I'm naughty, go get a trade. There's all of those sorts of messaging happening. So I think we end up with apprentices probably in trades. They're not very aware of what that trade probably is. I'm sure people in the room have had apprentices turn up on site and probably have no understanding of what they're actually in for. So I think we need to make sure we don't have trying to put square pegs in round holes, and I think that's probably to start with, but certainly some of those other issues later on, relationships with supervisors and managers is definitely a big one.
All right, Greg, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, look, it's a real challenging space, and I agree with Cassandra. We've got to get recruitment done a lot better. And look, it starts at careers. I'm very against the structure of careers advisors. And in New Zealand, it's crazy. Career advisors have to be teachers. Teachers have done university education, so they've got a natural bent to send all their college students into that. So if you take my son, who's now 22, he went to Wellington College, which is one of the biggest private public schools in Wellington. They've got a roll of 2,000 people there. I talked to the principal in quite depth. He's been there 30 years. 15 years ago, about 15% of their students was going to university. Now 82% go to university. And so we've made this pathway for university really, really easy and accessible when the government has funded it. And it still feels to me like you're a dummy, so let's go into the trade. And what we've got in the room here is amazing business owners that run multi-million-dollar businesses, run zero marketing, uses AI. And what we need to start creating is a pathway for business owners. And so it's not about, we're not explaining the journey well. And I will accept also that I don't think employers are dealing with the different generations that are coming through and modelling some of their behaviour about what needs to happen to make sure the stats. So look, I run Master Plumbers New Zealand, and I also run a business called Masterlink. We turn over 25 million. We've got 300 plus apprentices across New Zealand. And the key thing is for us is around having pastoral support for them. So we kind of have a guideline that a regional manager who looks after apprenticeships should only have about 50 to 60 apprentices, and they've got to give them support all the way through. And I just don't think you can have your business support, but the external support. So I'll just tell you a stat. Masterlink completion rates across New Zealand are 94%.
Wow, I was going to ask what the difference is, yeah.
So you can make a change to the dial, but you've got to actually have structure and support so you're nurturing them through their career, because they will go through ups and downs through their career, and you've got to make sure that it's there to bring them through.
Okay, do you want to add anything on to that, Josh?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Before I do though, Mates in Construction, we are a mental health charity and our focus is suicide prevention. So I'm going to give you guys some stats based on research that we have done. Just want to acknowledge that talking about mental health and suicide can be distressing. So if that's not anyone's cup of tea today, which is perfectly fine, now would be the time to step out. My colleague up the back, Justin Gange, the handsome fellow with his hand on his head, he is a mates worker, he's assist trained. So if anyone needs to have a chat with someone, you can see Justin on the way out or myself afterwards. That's just a bit of safety before we kick off. So when it comes to apprentices, we did a report in 2018. We sat down a bunch of trade apprentices down. They ran panel interviews with the university. Mates is a evidence-based organisation. Everything we do backed up with really, really robust research. And so they ran these panel interviews with the apprentices and tried to figure out what was going on. Because when we first started in 2008, we had a report that established that the average construction worker was about 6 times more likely to die by suicide than a workplace accident. For an apprentice, it was 10 times, okay? I ask that question, I tell that statistic to apprentices multiple times a week, and I say, look, given everything that you have been exposed to so far in your career, they've had to do a white card to get on site, they've started TAFE, they've done employer inductions, worksite inductions. Have you ever seen mental health or suicide listed as a hazard or a risk and controlled in any way? And either get blank stares or head shakes. So starting from that point, we knew that they were impacted, they knew that they were high risk. So 10 years down the track, 2018, we ran these panel interviews, and from there we put together a survey. And we established that we were going to ask as many apprentices as possible through a campaign called Speak Up, Be Heard. We put that campaign out to 30,000 construction industry apprentices in Queensland with the help of of the Queensland Government Department of Employment, Small Business and Training, and we got a phenomenal response rate, and it was used to create a report called The Impact of Bullying. It's such a well-titled report. The Impact of Bullying, Mental Health and Suicidality in Queensland Construction Industry Apprentices. It's 60 pages long. If anyone wants a copy, come see me after. I'll hook you up. It's a great report. But basically, we had nearly every female apprentice we contacted for that survey did the whole thing, and we found some really shocking statistics. So 30% or 27.3% of apprentices said that experienced workplace bullying in their career. Now, the average Aussie cops at about 9.5%. 20% of those apprentices said that the bullying was severe. We do not have access to data on severe bullying, all right? So right off the bat, they're 6 times more bullied than the average worker. Suicidal ideation stats, so thinking about ending their life in a 12-month period, for the average Australian is 2.5 to 5%, depending on what data source you go off. For apprentices, it was 30%. And that was 30% aggregated, so a massive kick up there. when we talk about females, and I told you most of the women apprentices did that whole survey, for them it was nearly 50%. Nearly half of them had thought about suicide in the previous 12 months, all right? So if you extrapolate that very unscientifically, you've got up to a 20 times greater risk for one of our most vulnerable trade groups, which is horrifying. Now, there are a few other ones in there around depression, around serious mental illness, okay? What that all linked up with was that there were high levels of workplace bullying in the construction industry. And we know that that's one of the biggest reasons that apprentices struggle. We've obviously got generational differences. The statistic that you quoted earlier about completion rates is bad. The other statistic that often gets quoted by, if you pull that data off the NCVER, is that only around 30% of apprentices who start an apprenticeship finish with the business that they start with. So you've got businesses that are putting on apprentices and they're investing a heap of money into doing this training with them, and only 30% of those businesses are actually seeing that person finish with them and able to reap the rewards of that investment. So when we're talking about some of these stats, we often look at, the attributes of the younger generation and that sort of thing, but we often don't always look at some of the issues that are endemic within the industry and people's expectations and opinions about the industry that have an impact on some of the people coming in. So we do some stuff around that. But yeah, that's a little bit about what I and what our organisation and the research that we've done points to why these workers are so impacted.
Yeah, no, staggering. When you're saying apprenticeships, so apprentices, you're saying in the whole construction area, aren't you? Like, I know today we're focusing on plumbing and gas, but you're talking the whole area, yeah.
Yep, so construction trades. So
Yep.
I think they call it the built environment now, but that's like your CPCs, so carpenters, plumbers, electricians, welders, bricklayers.
Yeah, and there's no breakdown into specific areas?
There are. You can filter through the data. You can have a look at our report, shows some of the different breakdowns, and you can also use the federal government's NCVER tool for filtering the data as well. Some of the things were like working for a big company, for example, was a protective factor. So apprentices who work for a large organisation often reported lower rates of bullying and higher rates of supervisor support. One of the things that was also protective was being a first year. So when you first start your apprenticeship, you tend to get a lot of support. The people look after you because you're new, you're green, and they want to make sure you don't injure yourself on their watch.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, their expectations increase. And so there are different things, and the tricky part is the fragmentation in apprenticeships. You have an apprentice plumber on Queen's Wharf in Brisbane, kid might be making 100K a year. You've got an apprentice plumber digging trenches for a housing estate out in the western suburbs, completely different story.
Yeah.
So two apprentices in the exact same trade, both sanitation plumbers, have completely different experiences with their employment and their apprenticeship.
Wow.
I was just going to say something positive to Josh's point. I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but actually our licensed trade, plumbers and electricians, actually have slightly better completion rates, and that would go to show that our licensed trades have a little bit more structure, a little bit more legislation, so apprentices are taken care of a little better. It's not fantastic, but it is definitely better than some of the other construction trades.
Yeah, but we still have to do better. Yeah, okay. All right, Kirsty, we haven't heard from you yet, so your thoughts?
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of an insight, I guess, from the ground, essentially DESBIT is currently implementing the train and retain strategy to get out in field to actually see and feel and hear what's actually going on the ground with our apprentices. And I can tell you now, every comment that has been made is exactly what we are hearing in relation to the support or non-support that's provided within the industry of construction. And especially in the plumbing space, I guess some of the things that we see quite predominantly is that the support is simply not there. There's a very big difference between those large and smaller employers, and those that are actually sticking it out and going the whole way to completion are those that indicate that they have strong support mechanisms in place, that they are checked in with, and that they are comfortable to actually raise and speak up when things are not going quite so well. We're also investing a lot of time in providing a lot of connection to other services that can actually support them through this journey, and letting them know that if they're not receiving the support directly within the workplace, that there are other avenues that they can challenge first or connect with first. Some of the other things too in regards to the cancellation space, so anytime that we receive cancellations that might indicate no support in workplace or potentially bullying or harassment, is an opportunity for us to pick up the phone and actually connect. So even if they are no longer there, we want to know what's actually happened so that we can go in and have a discussion with that employer around their culture and what's happening with future apprentices in their space. So that's some of the work that's happening with us.
Fantastic. All right, now we've got a few questions already from our delegates, and please feel free. As I said, we will take them from the floor as well. Plumbing industry RTOs, whether public or private, are currently self-reporting completion rates of 80 to 90% plus. No, 80 to 90 plus percent. However, industry, plumbing companies, are reporting a much lower completion rate, a significantly higher dropout rate. So why do you think there is a discrepancy? Yep, go Josh.
I might jump into that one there. I have a little bit of insight that might explain that discrepancy. So having worked in the RTO sector, when you put on an apprentice, they start, you'll organise with an ASIN like Busy at Work, and they'll come out and do your sign up. And there's always a bit of lag between when that notification comes through, and for some of the plumbing trades, depending on what specialisation they're in, it's not uncommon for an apprentice to have worked on the tools for a year before they actually get enrolled into their training because the demand is so high. So frequently I'll talk to apprentices who are in their second year who are just being put through their training. So you might have an apprentice who starts and drops out, and I don't know the exact stats around first year dropouts, but I can see very clearly how it would be easy for an apprentice to start and not actually make it to their TAFE or to their physical RTO training before they drop out, which would explain that discrepancy. I guess, if someone makes it a year, they can make it the 3.5 or 4 years that they need, but that would be, for me, would jump out as being the reason that you've got that discrepancy straight up.
There could also be, it depends, I guess, what the completion rates are being based on. Are we talking completion rates on the trades themselves, the Cert 3 in plumbing, or are we talking all their pre-vocational courses and their Cert 1s and they're still plumbing courses, but they're short courses. So if you add that all together, those completion rates could look a lot better than if we're just specifically speaking of the Cert 3 plumbing, which is the trade.
Okay, another question. With the brand new Build Skills Australia ramping up at present, what would be your one major suggestion to them that would positively influence the future of the plumbing industry? You can each answer that one if you want to start. We'll go down. Cassandra? No? Okay. Greg, you haven't said anything for a while.
Look, you've got to get the careers advisors and the people coming through more up to speed of what the trade's about. And we talk about having gold star apprentices, and you get gold star apprentices, you can market them, and they get basically bid on for positions. But we're trying to, as I said before, create future business owners, and the pool of people coming through isn't high enough quality. And so we've got to lift the spectrum of the trade to we're running professional businesses. Now, they'll do their trades for 5 years and then they'll go in to be business owners, like most of the people here in the room. We're not portraying that in colleges and schools, and that means we've been given what I call lower level candidates who then causes dropout rates. And so we've got to lift the standard of quality coming through and then give them the support that we can care and nurture and have wellbeing schemes that gets them through. I just get very, very frustrated that everything, including my kids, has to go to university. Why is that? We're going to have people in this room who employ hundreds of people, runs more professional businesses, but we're still pushing out marketing executives that we don't need.
Yeah.
And so we need to get the government to start funding. I mean, in New Zealand, we estimate we're 3,500 plumbers short, right? And the dial's not changing. We've got an ageing demographic, and I think it's the same in Australia. So more than 30% of the trade in New Zealand is 55 plus, and then there's 15% is 65 plus. We grew the apprentice numbers by 28% after COVID, but the number of licence holders only went up 1%. And so there's a massive need for quality people, but we're not we're not spending enough money in careers and colleges in talking about the trades enough.
Like the big picture is what you're saying, yeah. But then you've just said you're 3,500 short. Are people out there going, well, hang on, we just need apprentices, we just need people, and you're just taking anyone and everyone?
Yeah, well, the issue is everyone's advertising for qualified tradesmen, and all you're doing is generating wages to go up, and it's ludicrous. We talked at the Master Plumbers Australia New Zealand board meeting. There should be discounts for your licensed trades for companies who take on apprentices, and there should be a levy if you don't. We see now with apprentices start 1 year or 2 years, and then they transfer. They're transferring for $5 or a new ute, for Christ's sake. Back in my day when I'm a trade, you had a loyalty to your business owner, and that loyalty seems to have slipped by. But we've got people that are bottom feeding and trying to steal apprentices in second or third year because of the problem recruiting staff. Now, the government and other people should be rewarding the companies that commit to training apprentices, right? It's just so frustrating. So in New Zealand, whole construction industry, only 10% of businesses take on apprentices.
Oh.
And that's the sad reality because they see it as a cost. The reality is everyone, I'm looking at Bill here, they say, well, the apprentices aren't quality enough, they can't turn up on time, they use their cell phone too much and stuff. We were all shit when we started, right? And what you're doing is you're not developing just their trades, you're developing them as people.
Yeah.
Right? And what Josh says is, you've got to nurture them. You've got to change. You've got to deal with different aspects in different generations. And so business leaders have to change the way they deal with apprentices. And I did my apprenticeship 35 years ago. I got bullied to hell. And it was like, suck it up, that's okay. That's not the way of today.
It's not. I think most of us, I know I was bullied. Was everyone in the room? Has anyone here, bullied? Anyone not bullied at some stage?
I'll fix that up after the session.
He's the one that wants to eat dolphins. I tell you what, we're bullying you today. That's it. Wow. But yeah, you're right. It's very, very different. The other thing with the younger generation, and I've got kids in that, they think so loyalty, you spoke about loyalty. I know job changing, they can change as many jobs as they like because they actually see that as showing progress. Like they're trying to get further up the ladder. We all hung on to our job to show loyalty for, years. You said 15, 20. That's not the way people are thinking either. So you've got that to battle as well. Yeah. All right. Now we've got another question. Oh, hang on, I've lost him.
Before we move on, can I just jump on the back of what Greg was saying? So they raised some really good points about the support that gets offered to apprentices. So and also the messaging that's done. So at the moment, I go to industry events and we get a fair bit of stuff as people like, we're not attracting the best and the brightest to the trades. And that's not actually a reflection of the apprentices or the young people coming into the industry. That's a reflection of the way that it's being marketed.
Yes.
If you're not marketing a trade as an artisan occupation where you can learn the skills to become a business owner, then is it really their fault for not jumping on them?
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is around the loyalty is that, well, if you're a business person and you quote jobs and make a profit and do well, you're considered a good business person. Why then do we give apprentices a hard time for bailing for more money? Like, isn't that sound business acumen? If you're talking about a young person, it's like, well, why would you take this little job, putting a bathtub in for $200 when you can go and refit the whole bathroom for $2,000? And so some of those little things, they pick up on those inconsistencies in messaging.
Yeah.
And so that's just, and all really good points, but some of the messaging that we get back when we do talk to the young people.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now when Desbert speaks with employers about their culture, if the apprentice has identified there is an issue, what outcomes are achieved with that employer?
So outcomes achieved. So we can have a couple of instances. We could have the instance whereby the apprentice has already moved on and informed us of that, and we can also have the instance whereby the apprentice is still within the workplace as well. So we actually take the opportunity to provide all the investigation channels to obviously get insight from all sides. So rest assured, as the employers, everyone gets the opportunity to have their say and have that full discussion about what's actually going on, because we know there's always more than one side to the story in that space. DESBIT obviously endeavours to connect. We play a big role in the education and connection to the people that can help the very best, and quite often that is linking to other services. However, we are the one to provide essentially a case management session from the start to the end of that, and in some instances it is for individuals to move on to other employers because things do get too tough in that space. However, that employer is then someone who is continually educated by DESBIT beyond just that initial time frame, which is fantastic. And it's about working with them, linking them to those services that can help improve the workplace culture, to help improve the services that they provide to their next apprentice that they take on, and ensuring that we're involved from the actual registration of that next apprentice. It's not necessarily about removing employers completely from the first instance.
All right, I have another question. What has been done to make the sign-up process quicker? It takes weeks, months to get signed up, then more weeks, months to get TAFE to complete training plan and get induction done. Then there are no TAFE places available.
I can probably take that one.
Good.
So, weeks or months to get a sign up. If that was my organisation, please take my phone number and tell me, because I'd be pretty disgusted if we were taking months to do a sign up. Realistically, it depends on at what point of the year we're in. We're in our busiest quarter at the minute. Everyone's putting on apprentices at the start of the year. That's our busiest time. You might wait 2 weeks for a sign up at this point in time to get your apprentice signed up. However, we will backdate your contracts to their start date. So in terms of making sure that those dates match, we will take care of that. Sure, when we saw the boosting apprenticeship commencements wage subsidy, which was on a couple of years ago, no doubt you were waiting 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks for a sign up. Those wage subsidies just had all of our staff absolutely well and truly above capacity, and we just couldn't handle that level of work. But now, honestly, up to 2 weeks would be probably pretty standard, and sometimes we'd turn it around in a couple of days. So if you're waiting weeks and you're not using Busy, come and use Busy, you won't wait weeks. But in terms of TAFE or private training organisations, they are still dealing as well with that backlog of apprentices that were signed up during that boosting apprenticeship commencements wage subsidy. They are definitely at capacity. All training providers are at capacity. Realistically though, they should be touching base with you within the first 3 months to at least let you know, hey, let's do the enrolment, let's look at the training plan, let's get this signed, and give you an idea of those timeframes of when your apprentices can go to college. If that is not happening, then of course I would suggest that you speak to your training organisation and say, hey, we haven't heard from you. But I do know that all training organisations at the minute are at capacity, and they are struggling to get through the amount of apprentices that we have. So at the moment, Kirsty would probably know better, I think we're still tipping around 90,000 active in-training apprentices in Queensland at the minute. That is the highest that I have ever seen it and that's across all trades, of course, not just plumbers. But that's the highest I've ever seen it in my time. So training organisations were just not equipped to deal with that kind of volume.
Yeah, just to add to that as well. So we are at an all-time high. We have lots happening all the time, and just like yourselves struggling to keep your supervisors in your workplaces, training organisations are struggling to keep their teachers who would have been supervisors at some point in time as well. So as Cass had indicated, if you reach out to your RTO and you're not getting anything within that first 3 months, please make contact with the department, because we can help to discuss that communication, open those lines and get things moving along for you.
But I'm just asking this from an outside, this isn't a question. When the incentive was offered, wouldn't that just be natural that there would be this massive, influx of people, and you have to be prepared for it? Isn't that just common sense? Isn't that being, productive and, proactive?
Yeah, I think the lack of communication is probably, and I can appreciate employers in the room that sign up their apprentices and then they just don't hear anything, and that's not good enough either. So, I'm sure everyone is prepared to wait and understand that, classes are at capacity or they're struggling for trainers or whatever that is, but as long as that's being communicated. So I think we, during that time, all of the stakeholders in the apprenticeship sector probably could have done a better job of communicating the current challenges and how long things were going to take.
Okay. Oh. So say that again, Bill. Oh, they closed some of the regional colleges when numbers were increasing, they were closing. Yeah, well. Okay, apprentices are a huge cost to business. Could the department look to provide more financial support to employers for putting on apprentices?
Yeah, I don't agree with that statement.
Okay.
Apprentices are, if you're not making profit out of apprentices, you're doing something wrong. And so go talk to pro trade or stuff. I got a board member who probably has about 6 or 7 of our apprentices, and he says they're probably the most profitable workers that he has. And so apprentices should be charged for the job they do, not an hourly rate that they're paid. And it's changing the mindset of a business owner on output rather than, and I think there's a real issue with consumers, particularly when you're educating people, because you've got to remember apprentices are in training, right? And sometimes they'll go to a job and they might not add any value. Consumers have to understand that is actually keeping wages at a reasonable level because you're increasing the work capacity for Australia and New Zealand. And so, I mean, I always had this argument with one of our clients, the 22-year-old young guy who plays rugby union for the Hurricanes can dig a trench a whole lot quicker than Bill can, right? And so it's not about, it's the job you're doing, not about who's doing it. And you should be charging for the output, not the year or the apprentice they're in.
Okay, all right. Perhaps we need to create skill sets for employers to educate them on how to create a good workplace culture and good pastoral care to their apprentices. Hi, Josh.
We have those for you guys if you want them for free. Mates in Construction, we are an industry charity. We aren't free, but we don't charge people for access. So we've got a supervisor training program run by Justin Gange up the back. Absolute legend, great program. He brings many dozens of years experience to the program, and it's all around, off our research base, how do we empower leaders to improve conditions in the workplace. We run the apprentice program with apprentices, so we're out there communicating to the apprentices, hey, these are the risks, all right? This is some of the stuff you can do. Talk to them about mental health, suicide awareness, finances, drugs and alcohol, all that sort of stuff. And beyond that, you've got the other stuff around mental health and mental wellbeing that Mates does that's available to the whole construction industry. And starting from there, you've got the building blocks for what ProTrade was talking about, those cultural changes. So there is stuff out there. While I'm talking about this, I'd like to give a shout out to a few different mobs that are doing really good stuff in the space too. So Plumbing Industry Climate Action Centre at Beenleigh has a number of RTOs within it. They're phenomenal. Okay, they've got apprentice mentoring programs. They've got phenomenal trainers and stuff there. So they are investing, and by extension, the PPTU does an apprentice scholarship thing. Amazing work is happening there, and that's the feedback that we hear when we talk to apprentices.
Yeah.
Reese Plumbing gives Mates a pretty significant amount of money so that their customers can actually access counselling through Reese-funded EAP. So if you're a Reese customer and you're doing it tough, you can actually get EAP services as a result of that. Now, I hope I haven't stuffed that up. That was my understanding. So,
yeah.
And then you've got mobs like Q-Build and Busy Sisters. So these are organisations that are running targeted, tailored mentoring programs for their apprentices. And obviously, every apprentice doesn't have access to these. But if we continue to put emphasis on these things that improve culture and improve literacy and make it better, you'll start to see some of those other things increase in tow. Mm-hmm. The other ones that I was going to give a shout out to was the CFMEU also runs an apprentice mentoring program that does a phenomenal job. And all of these mobs are doing great things with apprentices, but they're also doing great things with increasing diversity, so bringing more women into the trades too.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of the things that are going right. And if you want to hear more about any of these things, come and see us afterwards. We'd love to hook you up with some freebies.
All right. There was a question. Sorry, I was going to say, sorry, Matthew, I hope we've answered that as well because it's similar to what he was asking. Yes. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say there is also a skill set that's been designed by TAFE Queensland. So TAFE actually has a supervisor skill set that anybody can access. So you can look into that. And I would suggest that, everyone takes a look at that. Your Australian Apprenticeship Support Network, whether it's Busy or someone else, we can also provide employer mentoring. So we can help bridge that gap between your supervisors and your apprentices on site as well. You just have to ask, and we're happy to deliver that.
So it's really speaking out, isn't it? It's asking, and that's what we seem to not do a lot of, ask for help. I think this one is for you, Cassandra. How far back does Busy backdate apprenticeship start dates?
I'm very aware that I have the department sitting next to me. No. So we have to backdate to the date that they effectively started their apprenticeship. So the legislation states that as long as there was a genuine offer and acceptance of apprenticeship position, whatever date that was, whether that was a handshake, hey, we had a chat, we agree that this is the date, whether that's the date they started getting paid, as long as there was a genuine offer and acceptance of that position, we will backdate to that date. Ideally, in Queensland, the Fed Act also states that you should actually sign up an apprentice within 14 days. So within starting an apprentice, we would like to know within 14 days. That rarely happens. Lots of employers have this old mindset of, no, we want to wait until probationary period's out of the way and make sure they're going to stay. I would suggest you don't do that. Call us. It is a one-party cancellation within the probationary period, so it's no skin off our nose to come and do that sign up, and then if something does happen, at least you're covered. You've been paying apprentice wages. They really should be signed up from that date.
All right, I think this is a follow-on. Backdating apprentice start dates creates issues where the TAFE training is years behind in their actual time.
Sure does. Don't do it. It does put them behind. So, if we're backdating 9 months because, a sign-up didn't happen, they're 9 months behind. They haven't been to college. They haven't been filling out, if they've got logbooks to do, all of that sort of stuff, they're automatically 9 months behind. What you also do is there are some incentives and trade support loans that are available to apprentices. So apprentices can access trade support loans over the 4 years. A lot of that financial support is in the first year, and it cannot be backdated. So when you sign them up, they're missing out on a lot of money, and if they're struggling with cost of living and things like that, you're actually financially hurting them as well. So like I said, within 14 days would be great, but as soon as you know you're putting on an apprentice, get your assing out there to sign them up.
Okay, now I think this follows on what Bill just said. Is there any work being done to improve availability of training in regional towns where travel and long-length TAFE blocks are being completed? Oh.
Tricky one.
I think Queensland is a very big state, and I think that is something that we're going to struggle with, probably more so than some of the other states. Training, access to anything really training and apprenticeships related in regional places is a bit of a challenge. And I do know that, if they don't have a trainer in one of those towns at one of those TAFEs or regional training locations, they just can't deliver the training. So they're struggling to get people as well. If we've got a labour shortage within industry, we have a labour shortage with our teachers and trainers at colleges as well. What I would say is if you can explore any other private training organisation options as well. I know with plumbing and electrical, there are limited options on who you can choose for your apprentices. But there is travel, obviously, allowances as well, and assistance that if apprentices do have to travel into metro locations or into Brisbane to do their training, then DESBIT does have funding to assist with that as well. But I wish I had the answer to that, but I don't.
Just on that, I've learned through some of our work with the PICAC at Beenleigh that there's only a handful of RTOs in the country that do the sprinkler fitter training. So there are apprentices from WA and Northern Territory that actually fly to Beenleigh of all places to do their training. So it's we've got it a bit bad, but there are other parts that it's all over. We're having some of those issues.
Can I just add that I think it's a hangover from COVID around the push out of training providers having spaces. And then we had the growth that we required around apprentices. We're actually not going to solve this issue. So what we've done in New Zealand is we're going to recognise workplace training. And we're going to use a digital app, improve it, and the certifier is going to sign off that compliance. Because we're never going to get ahead of the game. And so what frustrates me is you'll have an apprentice doing 100 cylinders a week, and then we had to send them to a training provider to learn how to do a hot water cylinder. It's ludicrous, right? So you've got to remember, training happens in the workplace every day. So we just need to start recognising that If you can recognise that, you can reduce the modules that you have to send them away for. And so technology now, you talk about, we had a presentation by AI and stuff, and we're not using technology to make us more productivity gains. So we shouldn't be this whole regime of, so in New Zealand we have to do 18 block courses. We should be getting that down to 9 and saying all the stuff that you do in your business, Kent, we're going to recognise, and you're going to send a photo and you're going to sign a declaration that the apprentice can do that. That then reduces the time away from work, increases productivity, and reinforces that training happens in the workplace.
Wasn't there a discussion, I don't know when we spoke about this, but wasn't there a discussion about smaller plumbing companies collaborating together with an apprentice, so their strength might have been, I don't know, residential, and then so they actually get to experience that work? Has that happened, or was that just something that someone thought was a great idea? Does that ring a bell? It has happened?
So just to weigh in on that, when you sign up an apprentice in Queensland, you fill out a form what's the name of the form? ERA, Employer Resource Assessment. Yeah, so you basically agree to give that apprentice the entire scope of their trade. And so what actually naturally happens with businesses is you will do what you're best at, or you'll find your niche. Very few plumbing businesses, make a conscious effort to take on every single type of work. And so I'm a carpenter by trade, so an example is we don't really pitch roofs anymore in Queensland. It's all truss roofs. So the really tricky part is you have a contractual agreement with the government to put your apprentice on, that you are going to train that apprentice in pitching roof and building stairs. It doesn't make business sense to do that because it's costly, it requires complex skills, and it's just not in demand. And so that's that tricky part with where when you've got businesses that do things, you might have an apprentice who does 300 hot water cylinders a month, but he might be missing out on other stuff. And so that is a stressor for the apprentices because they're acutely aware. If they've spent 6 months, Sparky changing light bulbs, that's an eighth of their apprenticeship where they haven't been learning how to do board work and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but just, I suppose what I'm saying is that's the advantage of group schemes, so we can rotate our apprentices round from commercial, residential, maintenance, group housing, and give them that broad skills. And so we're trialling a whole pilot around that where we have 5 apprentices and they rotate around different businesses. And we've got to keep the trades, I'm a big advocate, we've got to give broad brush skills. If we're really defining them, that's problematic and it's going to cause issues into the future.
I think that's difficult for, for a small to medium size, and probably back a couple of questions was, what can build skills do for industry? I think, roughly 90% of our businesses in Queensland are SMEs, and they find that extremely challenging. It might be easier for larger employers or group schemes to move apprentices around, but SMEs just can't do that. I think the key there is communication to the apprentices. So when you start an apprentice, being very clear and giving them that line of sight of what your business is, what they will be doing. I know of one plumber that, they take on an apprentice and they say, you see this shovel? This shovel is your best friend for 12 months. Do not ask me to do anything else for 12 months. And whilst that might seem harsh, that apprentice knows that that is what they will be doing at 12 months. What we're doing is we're starting apprentices. They've got in their mind what they think they're going to be doing within the first 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. They're not getting there, and then they're getting stale and they want to look for something else. If we're really clear up front on what they will be doing, what that line of sight is, what the opportunities are for growth, development, what they can get at the end of 4 years, I think, that would help.
All right, I know we're saying that we need to explain to apprentices, the bigger picture and tell them, but one of the questions is how do we encourage more employers to put on apprentices? So can we wrap up? We are running out of time, but could each of you just sort of come up with what you think might be something that helps do that with the employers? Do you want to start?
Yeah,
Kirsty?
so if we can have some really good consideration about the people that we want in these roles, it's changing. It's a very, very big changing market. The people that we are attracting, how has the industry changed in the last 10 to 15 years? Who are we attracting? There's more of a technical aspect to it. It's not necessarily those that can just lift heavy things anymore. In that space, Desbot's also got some social media hitting the ground now in regards to attracting new apprentices and new employers to the space of apprenticeships here in Queensland. So you'll see that on billboards and buses and all bits and pieces, social media up and through till June. So there's some really good action happening there.
Just very quickly, so the federal government's currently conducting a review on the incentive structure for apprentices. So if you do want to have an input on it, jump on, Google federal government incentives. That's probably a bit above my pay grade, to be completely honest, but that's for industry to decide. So you guys get in on that and you put your thoughts in, because they do have to consider your submissions.
So look, it's as simple as that. The number one issue that we have is the workforce shortage. And so the only way to resolve that, in New Zealand, we're on the green list for plumbing, drainlaying, and gasfitters. We brought in 36 last year. So immigration isn't going to solve it. The only way we can nurture and have a future workforce is through apprentices. And what we've got to do is we've got to incentivise the good employers that take on and commit to wellbeing programs and do that. And we've got to hit the businesses that don't take on apprentices with higher levies, because we've got to have the good and the bad. So we're going to reward and penalise. But ultimately, everyone in this room, probably except for Penny, was an apprentice. And so they've created a career, and we've got to really start at that career stuff and start getting people understanding they can potentially be a business owner. And that story is a much more palatable for young people to come through.
Cassandra, anything
I think
else?
it's just the mindset for employers to understand that if you keep looking for the same thing, you just want tradies, those tradies aren't there. If you want to future-proof your business, then you're going to have to take a few steps back and put on apprentices, and it's not going to solve your labour shortages overnight, but it is a really good long-term strategy to ensure that, you're future-proofing your business.
I think this session, I had so many more questions for you. I think this session could have just gone on and on. So maybe when we break now, everyone can have a chat to them if you've got further questions. Or if you could maybe have a look at the app and the questions, and if there's something you can see who's directed the question. If you could answer it, that would be fantastic. But you've done a wonderful job up here today. So put your hands together, please. Cassandra, Greg, Josh and Kirsty.